you've all picked a general topic, and your task is to write questions at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So you're writing an assessment, and you can start with one question at each level, and you can kind of expand from there. You have a general topic, and then you might have some sub items within that. Some people are wondering how many, and answer is at least one. We'll start with that and go from there. And so we're kind of striving for an assessment with, minimally 3 questions, but maybe 2 questions at each level would be good to see where it goes. And so why don't you work on that for a bit? And, one of the things we're going to do is share our results with each other and get some feedback. So, let's just take, at least 15, 20 minutes at this point and work on that, and we'll see how you're doing, and we'll go from there.
If you feel like you're stuck or anything, we can also make it a little bit discussion based as well. If
Yeah,
you want to work together. You can do it within your groups, or we can, do it all together as well. It's another option.
Yeah.
So I guess the assessment points would just be like the bit of knowledge you want the person, the student, to remember, to know, to be familiar with. Like, imagine you gave a lecture or class on something, and these were some points you covered in your lesson. Now you want to test the student to make sure they pick that up from what you taught them.
Yeah. So here's an example.
Exactly, like something specifically. Imagine you were writing it for like a quiz or on a homework or something.
So assessment points basically like the key takeaways from a lecture.
Right, that would be the learning outcomes, and then the questions would be.
So you have a topic like web security. What would be some key concepts in web security? You could have. There's different types of attacks. SQL injection.
TLS use, different methods for authentication, public key cryptography, secure programming.
Classified software.
All right.
We had a couple subtopics for that. I would say our top 3 is just classified software. Okay. So it's all like there's anything more than that. It's way too big for the topic class, right? And now I can violate. So, what are things on what steps take to that solution?
So what was your topic?
Classified software.
So maybe then you would ask like the key concepts.
What type of learning of machine learning?
Yeah.
Yes. Concept on there. Just take your overall concept and maybe drill down from there to a couple items that are more specific that ask this question.
Yeah. Related items, types of machine learning techniques. Yeah, lots of human labor there. Yeah. To be yelled at. That covers two subtopics. I mean, that's big.
I think on the team one document, you updated or key concepts to like related item or something. And I framed probably that across all the other.
Oh,
I'm not.
you could do that though.
Well, there's some training data. That's I like. Well, one thing that I asked, like.
Topic and related items, right?
Oh, that's what that, okay, I guess that's what that. All related items, yeah.
So that needs to go to the.
Volunteer to be the scribe. Questions.
Yeah.
Hey, you got work to do.
So basically, I've got everything written down. If that helps.
The assessment plan is really question. It's more like the topic and what one students to know about, right?
Yes.
So I've taken our subtopics with questions. I've been shooting my techniques, supervisors versus supervisor. And one I just thought up, pre-processing training and.
Yes.
Technical.
That's how we can just keep it. And somebody else.
So, what are some questions we can ask for, we're focusing on. Yeah. Pretty straightforward questions. Each night quiz to assess whether the student is able to remember key points related to concepts. I also.
They already sent me my business card with the scan. Yeah, I can't put it. For the new research. What's, CySER,
Why?
Credo.
Yeah.
For research and engineering.
Why?
So.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of asking people, finance professor to be on paper, engineer would be the most closely aligned choice, I guess, with the work I'm doing.
Why are you?
That's probably work. Yeah. Solar could be a. Yeah, I asked him a while ago. Yeah, that'll be good to have him because this project is almost, one foot in computer science and one foot in education. I expect to have him on my committees over at OSU.
But I mean, we've already got the.
Yeah.
Is there like an agreement between OSU and WSU?
Like,
Like doing that kind of thing? Well,
even though you.
so I
Yeah, so a lot of you have questions, right? So that's understand is, why we use decision trees for computation, why would we.
You can always have an external member from a different university. So that's, there's not, it's just a general agreement. Any PhD committee can have an external director. I think it's a good idea, actually, to find an expert to do that. So as appropriate, OLA will be external committee here for advice and type of areas. Well, you know, assuming, yeah, that's a good question.
No, but he participated in that one HCI
Yeah, so
class.
he's gonna stay to keep the committee. I have two students. It's a big ask. So
Yeah, I thought about it.
I would say, you know, if you're still interested after the.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't need another degree from WSU.
What's that?
I don't need another degree from WSU. Yeah. I mean, I've always been in a situation where it's very convenient and affordable for me to go to school here. So I could save money by going to school here. And I've been happy with, you know, my experiences here at WSU, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, if I were to do another degree after this, I would definitely go to another institution.
Two each, really. So we've got a topic, and actually I took away my own things. Test machine learning techniques, supervisor. Got it. Questions about these in general. Types, why, how long use additional consequences.
That's right.
Else on our document right now, so that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd also like to see you write the answers to the questions. I noticed on team one, for example, these are pretty open-ended. So think about
having you provide the answer, I think will also help you connect, like make sure you're designing your questions at the correct level. Because for example, if we're working at the remember level, and you come up with a question and your answer is like a paragraph, you're probably actually operating way higher in Bloom's taxonomy. Whereas, you know, an appropriate question at the remember level is going to have a simple answer like, you know, what is this, or list a couple of types of these, and then you just have the simple answer of, you know, this is one type, this is the second type, you know, pretty simple, short answers. And then once we get up to the apply level, then we'll start having the longer answers that require you to sort of provide a bit of interpretation along with their answer.
Yeah.
So for these apply questions, group one, could you come up with a specific scenario and then ask them to sketch out how to apply unsupervised learning? It's better if you have something more specific. It's more testable.
Yeah, providing students with like a specific scenario is going to help them understand the problem a lot better. You know, if you can make it relatable to them, but at least it will provide them with more details on what you're trying to get at for them to answer. Yeah, and the scenario could be something super simple, like we saw in that example item for the CCI. It's just, you know, a law firm stores sensitive data on a local network, and then, you know, the question builds off that. Or some of the other questions on there have much more elaborate scenarios, but you know, you go either way.
I can't listen to you.
Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like it's size of 8. That's
But it's not a
I don't think it's one thing, so now it's unfortunate. Do you hear any further words on it? No.
Which.
Is that actually? That might be a topic. How would you know which significant is? Like classified roles.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Supposed to answer all the questions. But answer the questions. And he understood questions. Can't do that. Well, from the answer, I think it's what it is. Yeah, originally, it was how would you use what's your question? Now, you ask the third question is, if there is a new CDE introduced, how do we know which CDE or not, right? So the third question.
This might be your.
Okay. Well, no, yeah, I mean, you know what you're saying, I guess. Like, well, the first one was, yeah. Oh.
I want classification. Okay.
And
I only do that access to that.
Okay,
Yeah, that's.
For example, we
yeah, the
Or generator at the end, or.
yeah. So, collect data.
It's a matter of like.
Yeah.
You're right. Question is that you're asked how given technique differs from other techniques. That would be more comprehensive.
Actually, that. Answer both.
Yeah, differentiate.
Comparing, yeah.
Differentiate.
Classifying, yeah, understanding, comparing, explaining, differentiating. That's understanding.
Everyone.
Yeah, list two different types of attacks with the remember and then understand and compare those two types, list their differences or similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And without the, rather than necessarily.
Oh, wait, yeah, you said that. Yeah, one question. That's fine. That's your vote. Come up with a wage for several students in applied concepts, thinking that prices, so too. I'm playing around. Yeah.
Yeah, through that, the apply level is a little more in depth, so that can take more time, so this, you know, the time saved is that.
Probably.
One.
Yeah. That's for real. Yeah, I think it's like, so, that's a good question. Hey, grab it by file.
So. Then. And then there's a max. It's not. Data set that we,
Yeah.
I think we're meant to wrap up at 11:30. We were gonna do discussion. before
That's where it's.
Yeah. Probably start that file. So what I want to do is, I want to go through each group's document, review it, and make some suggestions. Yeah, so that,
So it isn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
we'll
Yeah.
finish before,
When I-
finish by 11:45. Right. So
Closer to that.
we may finish by 11:30.
Intrusion
I just
detection,
find-
so that's,
I think
so I'm looking at like. I think the rest is.
Yeah, yesterday.
Like,
11:30.
okay, for processing. There's nothing to do.
Right.
Processing. So set of techniques.
Yes, they're good guy. I took one for this problem. Then try to make very. So we
Go.
First of all, is it national or not?
Good question.
And he gave out actually three next. So which one is best? Or there are some things that will not, the connection will not be met. How many persons are being right now with her? That's then, like, I got better. He's the one that.
Outside natural storms. Or that's pretty naturally processing, but be huge, so you also.
Whatever. And
So like I would be thinking something if I was like talking about
there's
Yeah.
something. Which categories?
what it is. That's why I don't like so like one
So that's why it's good. That's we identify easier rate.
I'm not able to have
It's like a lot of information. And separate ordinances that, there's one. Basically, revisions for- There's some. You gotta do it.
That's like, so I agree with it.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, yeah.
They usually actually follow from there. There's like,
Not yet.
yeah. No. That happens. Different types of things. What? Yeah. Like,
So team one, you consider yourself done? Yeah. Got it.
Does your team need a few more minutes? Okay, that's good. We will try to move on to the next part, so the discussion and sharing of results, maybe the next 4 or 5 minutes. You think I'll have enough time for you guys? Yeah, Jim, I think we're able to access the document and see what you put in.
Same way. Right. Yeah, yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
So where the user is connected.
So I don't want to go through it. Should I just bring up the team documents up here, have them talk about it?
That's how we should do it.
Very impressive. So these cameras in the room just I guess they respond to sound and they'll just turn and home in on whatever the loudest source of sound is. All right, you all set? All right. So what we'll do, we'll go through your documents with you, maybe have you talk a little bit about what the topic was that you chose and go over your questions with us. And I think Dr. Funkhausen and I might have some feedback and have a little bit of discussion.
Start with team one. So you folks chose classifying software vulnerabilities as the general topic, and machine learning techniques as a related item, and supervised versus unsupervised learning as a related item. So you're proposing machine learning as a way of classifying software vulnerabilities, if I understand this correctly. And drilling down further, there are machine learning techniques for classifying software vulnerabilities that could be classified as supervised and unsupervised. So you want people to understand those distinctions. I'm trying to think if you could make this any more focused.
Are there specific algorithms like within supervised that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are.
What would be some specific algorithms?
So for unsupervised learning, James Colostring. to in depth, you can say, for K is clustering, how would you pick value from K? So for that, there are multiple ways. So we're using DBI index, data disclosure index. There are elbow method and there are so many other ways to identify value.
Any other algorithms that might be,
Supervised learning, you might choose something like multi-layer perceptrons. Actually, called neural networks.
multi-neural networks? Unsupervised?
Yes.
So what you can see is if you could actually map this out as a taxonomy of, to articulate the relationships among knowledge elements. All right, well, we'll go with that. I'm just trying to push it a little further. So for remember, list some types of unsupervised learning techniques. Essentially, what you're asking people to do is identify, I mean, at a more basic level, right? What is question?
I don't know, with what is, you're kind of asking them to describe unsupervised or supervised learning. I think those might actually fall under understanding. When you're getting beyond just recalling.
Yep.
So I think,
Because you could reach the answer in like a couple of words,
yeah,
not like a paragraph. So that's why we came up with the list.
yeah, I think, yeah.
Understand also asks why questions. I'm not sure if those should be understand or if they might fall closer to why. But we consider various types of supervised topics. Why would you use this?
Yeah,
I think that fits understanding. Now, if you were to change a little bit and say, give someone a specific situation or scenario and say, what's better? Do we want to use supervised or unsupervised? Then that's getting up into like apply and maybe even analyze. But I think this works for understand. You know, why would we use decision trees for classification? Yeah, so I think that way, like going that direction from give unsupervised, what are some situations we would use that versus look at this situation, analyze it, and then work to tell us which what's best to use. That would be up to them.
I think one of the issues with remember, with some unsupervised learning techniques, you could maybe associate different types of techniques with unsupervised and supervised. But isn't there some sense in which people should try to think, there seems like a higher level here of remembering a broader question you could ask. A more basic question. The topic is classifying software vulnerabilities. What would you need to remember?
Talk about the topic specifically, classifying software vulnerabilities. One question of remembering would be like, what are some features of the software vulnerability case?
Yeah. What are key software
The question was specifically about what are some features. That is an actual term specific to machine learning.
What are features of software vulnerability?
Yeah, of software vulnerability data sets.
A lot of language packed into that. What are features of them?
Description.
So one, they're natural language descriptions in most of them. That's an important thing to understand. It's not a well-regimented, categorized data set.
What are some of the natural language descriptions? We're not- CVE?
Yes.
What's CVE?
Series of common vulnerability numbration. ID, specific ID attached to that, and also CVE description that goes, it's a whole description that is attached to the ID.
And so there are databases that store these known vulnerabilities in software or hardware, and they're assigned a number, a CVE number, and then you can look them up by keyword searches, which is that would fall under, I guess, the natural language processing, and then, if you know the specific one you're looking for, you can look it up by the CVE number. But I guess I think what you're getting at is those come with a description of the vulnerability that can be used for, for classifying the software vulnerabilities.
Would it be useful in this space to know what the vulnerability enumerations are? A list them.
That would be one thing, knowing.
And
Maybe
what
not
about
all of them, but specific
If
ones.
you just focus on specific ones, let's say cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, there are so many SQL injections, there are so many other descriptions in there. So what we are trying to do is identify those vulnerabilities and classify them according to that category.
according to what categories?
Categories like some fall under cross-site scripting, some fall under there are so many categories.
Like if the description for the CVE contains the phrase cross-site scripting, you can group all of those as cross-site scripting related CVEs or right, yeah. So like the list cross-site scripting vulnerabilities or the CVEs that fall within that category.
Yeah, I think the problem is we become expert in a topic we take a lot for granted.
Yeah.
So I'm approaching this as a non-expert in machine learning and trying to make sense of. It seems I have to remember a lot more than what's listed here to kind of get into this space. So I'm asking you to render the ordinary extraordinary, things you take for granted, highlight them, and try to articulate questions that get at that knowledge. That's what this exercise entails. Go back to first principles.
Yeah.
Because look at how packed this statement is. What are features of software vulnerability data sets? You could ask, someone approaching this might not even know what a software vulnerability data set is. So.
Well, I would think if your assessment is classified as software vulnerabilities, you have discussed that as part of the learning outcomes that you tried to assess.
Yes.
Now, when the group put this together, they were talking about teaching them about machine learning, it seemed. So I think that's the disconnect here is this a assessment thing about learning about machine learning, which then can be applied to software vulnerability assessment, or is it about software vulnerabilities, or is it mix and match?
I think it's both. I think they're bringing together both.
Yeah, it's about a specific topic in machine learning, which is trying to classify this type of problem. And either we can assume that the person has knowledge ahead of time about machine learning, in which case, then we could be asking those questions that are very specific to the software vulnerability assessment part, or we can assume that they don't know that, in which case questions about like data set features are not necessarily the best questions for the remember part portion, because they might not necessarily understand what
Whereas data set.
Yeah,
how
this is-
they would do- how
Yeah.
they do machine learning on data set. They don't know those stuff. First they need to understand what is machine learning stuff.
Right.
So then they can go into deeper and
Yeah.
try to identify what they can do more.
that is why we originally had our remember portions more focused on the machine learning
Yeah.
element, and the applied portion more focused on the specific problem
Right.
that we had.
Right. Well, you can see this is more challenging than it may appear on the surface level.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're basically asking all of you to, after a crash course on Bloom's taxonomy, to jump straight to the apply level using Bloom's taxonomy at the apply level. So,
Right.
jumping right up,
Yeah,
way
it's
up
tough.
there.
It's tough. So let's just look at your apply. Let's jump to apply. Suppose we have an 8 gigabyte data set consisting of software vulnerabilities. If there is a new CVE introduced, how would we know which CWE it would be mapped to? So first of all, CVE I know is common vulnerability enumeration. I don't know what CWE is.
It's a common weakness.
Yeah, common weakness would be things like buffer overflow. A CV is a specific buffer overflow in a specific product. However, not all CVs map to CWEs in the data sets. So the thing here in this question, I'd want to know what I would ask as a student, what's in the data set? Is it something like we would see in a standard Microsoft data set, which they don't list the CWEs?
Yes.
So how could you reformulate that to address Jim's question? How could you edit this to address that?
Maybe specifying the type of data set, like he's saying, or maybe give a couple.
Yeah, I can maybe specify like based on the CVE ID, CVE description, how would you classify that with CWE ID it falls under? Because CWE ID is like a brand to it, and all the CVEs goes under separate categories that CWE has.
So, yeah, and then your solution, we can use SOM toolbox or deep learning toolbox.
Those are the toolbox specific to MATLAB. If you want.
But we didn't get at those that remember and understand. So you're asking them to apply something that wasn't addressed previously. So I would probably want to ask questions about those toolboxes. Or
Probably remember.
yeah, like
Yeah, remember, so at the remember level, you'd ask just what are two tools we can use for mapping CDs to CWEs? The answer is SOM Toolbox and Deep Learning Toolbox. And understand, maybe say, compare and contrast two methods for mapping CDs. And then at apply, you're saying, maybe, use SOM Toolbox. Given this data set, use SOM Toolbox to do this with it. And then to create, maybe you'd say, write your own tool for doing this.
Yes.
Create your own tool.
So what was the remember part of the,
Yes, what are two tools that could be used for mapping CDs?
could be something, what does CVE stand for?
Yeah.
Is that remember?
Yeah.
But you could remember, I could say it's a common weakness of enumeration, but I may not know what that means. I may not understand what it means.
Right,
But
so
I guess
that
I
would
do
be-
know,
Yeah.
All right.
Being able to assign meaning to that.
All right, so you can see we can flesh this out more with more time. Added some ideas here. All right, let's move on to group 2 because we're running out of time, and want to also look at group 2 at depth. So right here. So they looked at the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and machine learning, how machine learning works, and validating training data. That's a big, a lot on your, there's a lot on your plate. Did you get to all that? Did you get to both those topics?
Yeah, we didn't go very in depth on machine learning.
Okay. All right, so remember questions. What is the CIA triad definition of confidentiality? How about, let's start with this.
So one thing
What
I'll
is,
say,
what-
right?
what is CIA, right?
If we look at the understanding Bloom's taxonomy documents, defining something is a keyword you're going to see at the understanding level, typically. I don't know, retrieve definitions. Oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Never mind, I retract that. Yeah, okay, define is just.
So it's available, it's with C,
Confidentiality.
integrity, available. All right, what is the CIA triad definition of confidentiality? So is this remember or is this understand? I guess it's remember. Definition of integrity, availability. Yeah, I think that's good. I just added one question that's even higher level, but I think that is it. Machine learning. What is the definition of machine learning? Yeah. What are the main steps of the machine learning process? Acquire, process, understand, apply machine learning. So, very good. Understand. How do you verify the integrity of a file? Does that sound like apply? Check the hash of the file. Now, is a how question an understand question? guess explaining.
explain how, describe
Okay.
how.
I think that's right then.
Yeah, explaining how to do it, and then applying would be actually asking them to do that on a specific
Right.
situation.
What part of the triad does denial of service and tax affect? Really? Yeah. Machine learning. What is the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning? I saw that question in group 1 as well. What are some examples where machine learning can be used? How about examples in, oh, this is just, what if you've made this specific to cybersecurity? So intrusion detection isn't, if you look back at team 1, they were using they were classifying intrusions. Is that one of them? What I would say to make this more so what other examples from cybersecurity?
Malware classification based off of malware.
Okay. Apply. You're a security analyst. An employee recently opened an infected email attachment in your organization and hit by a ransomware attack. The ransomware has encrypted all of the patient record files. In the framework of the CIA triad, explain how ransomware affects each aspect of the triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So that's applying these concepts to this ransomware. Yes. What steps should the organization take to resolve the ransomware attack? So what are they applying there? What knowledge are they applying there?
They're enhancing the availability by going to stable processing each time, just because their systems are down. They probably, while malware, while anything's affecting their system, they shouldn't bring anything on their system until they determine that.
So this has to do with enhancing availability.
Yep.
I'm just trying to link it into these other concepts at the lower levels. Begin restoring from backup.
It's also working on the availability aspect. Possibly integrity too, if you can cross-check the backup to if you get your files back and see if anything's changed, that you can change and assume that everything.
Then you have user training to prevent future incidents. So you haven't really talked about training.
That could enhance availability again, just by like mitigating future ransomware risk by not clicking on those points or something like that. Kind of reaching on that one a little bit.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think if, based on this prior training, users or learners would understand what steps an organization should take. I don't know. I mean, what are they applying here? You know, I guess if you had some principles here for addressing attacks, like what are some ways to mitigate attacks? Then I think you'd be on good firm ground down here, but I think you didn't lay this groundwork earlier. So this question here, I think needs a little more development up here. It's a good question, just needs a little more of a foundation. That'd be my comment on that one. Machine learning. You are a security analyst. Your company uses machine learning algorithms in order to detect malicious network activity. Your manager has expressed concerns that the machine learning data sets you use have been compromised by an attacker. Please consider the following questions related to this scenario. How would you test whether your machine learning data set has been compromised? So are they applying this integrity of the file hash? We talked about that right there. Yeah, okay. So they're applying that here. How would you resolve the issue once you verify that the data set has been compromised? This, I think, requires a little more development to get to that. How would you mitigate compromised machine learning data in the future? Again, I think talking more about security procedures and their role in protecting and handling data would be foundational to this. So I think these are all great questions. All groups come up with valid questions.
There's one more group if you want.
What's that?
There's a third group.
Oh, there is a third group. Sorry. So Jim, you work solo. Don't want to forget you, Jim. So definitions of
That's
confidentiality.
okay.
This looks quite comprehensive. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we're looking at CIA just like the previous group. Authentication, authorization, security policy, models, and attacks. So that's quite an ambitious list of topics there.
But then I only had questions for some of them.
Yeah, so talk about HIPAA law, designed to allow patients to control who has access to their health information. This is which security property? Utility, confidentiality, integrity, availability. So, James, do you agree that's remember?
I think maybe it goes a little beyond remember. So you have to remember what confidentiality is, and then, but I think we're also going a step further, and you're asking someone to understand the meaning of confidentiality. So to answer this question properly, you have to actually not just know that confidentiality is part of the CIA triad, but you have to understand the meaning behind confidentiality, which is fine. But that question, should be understand as well.
So how would you replace this in the remember question? Jim, do you have any ideas?
I mean, other than asking to define it, or even just a simple, what are the three letters in the CIA triad mean? Gives very simple definitions. That gets fine. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question at the understand level. And
Yeah.
I think it's like Chris said earlier, sometimes as experts, we kind of forget we take certain things for granted. And I think, just being able to, just knowing what, that confidentiality, integrity, and available are these key pillars of cybersecurity is just being able to remember that is, a core concept on its own.
Yeah.
So you have in the second question, define authorization. So define.
Yeah, I confused that earlier too, but yeah, that's the foundational remembering level.
It is.
Yeah, and see, that's why I thought the identify, I was thinking this was more identify on number 1 too, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think 2 is fine. Defining a term is remember. Yeah, good. which category of attack is an attack against confidentiality? So of course, you need to know what these types of attacks are. Or you
Right, so it's
can't-
kind of a mix and match, and that's where I put it up a level.
Yeah. That's a good question for understand. The Bell, Laputa, Padula, and Viva multi-level access control models have separate primary security focus. Could they be used together? Well, this would be hard if you don't know what those models are.
Right.
And I would want to know what you mean by use together, like to what end? Access control?
Yeah. So that makes sense to expand that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
could
could it
a file be marked with both? I mean, yes, I talk about these when I teach my class, and so, and this is a common question I use because most students get it wrong.
Okay, so apply. Suppose you are building a computer system, you add a feature for users who have forgotten their password. You have two choices. Your system sends them their old password using secure email to their registered email account. Your system uses a backup authentication that lets them create a new password. Bob says either A is more secure or they are the same. Do you agree with Bob or disagree with Bob? Why? So here, what are they applying, Jim?
So here they're taking their knowledge of where we discuss things like common ways of storing authentication information, which was one of the things above. What's a good way of managing it? And so they're trying to now take that knowledge and apply it to a new system is my thought, a design I'm doing.
Yeah. That's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
Disagree with Bob. Any authentication system that can recover a password is susceptible to having that password stolen. Passwords or other authentication information must be stored in a way that cannot be leaked.
Yeah, I would take this opportunity to mention that in the CCI, one of the key things they discussed, it doesn't show up on the list as its own item, but there's the concept of adversarial thinking. So if you approach this problem requires you to use adversarial thinking to identify why Bob is wrong here, because if you're thinking as, a bad actor here, they could then, if your system operates based on option A, then a bad actor can just pretend to be Bob and say, hey, I forgot my password, please send it to me. And then he's got, Bob's password. So being able to use adversarial thinking is pretty important for
So that's what that's an app. Right.
The other thing I do is when I teach this type of thing, I actually show them a list of common passwords found on the internet. Said that these were stored in databases that were unprotected. People downloaded them. Hey, the most popular one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Things like this, and I show them these lists. So there is some assumptions here of some background knowledge that the students have from the classes.
Yeah, these are great questions.
Yeah, these are from my intro cybersecurity class. The types of questions I ask.
You got some experience with this.
Well, I've been doing it 30 years.
Yeah, only 30 years.
I taught our first cybersecurity class spring of '92. So literally
Wow.
30 years.
Impressive.
Go up a little. There's the next question is there, number 2.
You're designing a web-based system for the university for keeping track of students, their names, addresses, email addresses, student ID, course, and grades. What aspects of the principles of security are applicable to this situation? You have to identify what's applicable. You are right. Identifying what's applicable, is that the same as applying? I guess it's applying in a general sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So they're having to say, yeah, these are, it's like, what's relevant? Gotta go back to this. Understand. I mean, I guess there's a difference here between saying, apply confidentiality and is confidentiality relevant and how. Certainly apply confidentiality would be at the apply level. Asking what is relevant, is that at the understanding level? This may, see, I think this may be, this may be kind of a hybrid question. But it's a good one. Pretty sophisticated. It would really test students' knowledge of what those aspects or those concepts, you know, whether they really understand them. All right, well, leave any time. I wanted to kind of close with Slater saying, are we just barking up the wrong tree here? Or are these types of questions useful in the real world? So you want to give us a parting comment on that?
I mean, these questions are definitely useful in the real world. I mean, take this question right here, like, yeah, offers a lot of knowledge on like design aspects, what considerations. These are a lot of times what, I mean, cybersecurity stuff, so developers often overlook this type of stuff or have assumptions that other parts of the system are managing certain things. So, yeah, I think developing these types of questions, really getting an understanding. Playing every people, a lot of times, people can tell me definitions really well, but the moment I ask them an application question, like, describe to me what some cybersecurity risks are with like machine learning, no idea at all, and tainted machine learning data is the most common. A testing plan, no idea, but if I ask them, what is asymmetric encryption, they can answer it. Any application outside of that,
Yeah.
it's not easy thing to get out.
Yeah. I don't know, Jim, if you heard all that, but the gist was these are useful levels to consider. That application is often what students have the most trouble with. And I would also say, I think what I learned from this exercise is the importance of building up higher levels of knowledge from lower levels of knowledge. And we could see that in this process of when we were discussing these different questions. I was asking, well, what knowledge did they need to, or what do they need to remember? What do they need to know at these previous levels in order to be able to do this application? So from a pedagogical standpoint, that is from the standpoint of someone trying to design a learning activity, starting with this remembering level and then going to understanding could be useful to make sure that you build up what's necessary then at the higher levels. But a lot of times we can, as we say, take for granted or we just overlook some of this other basic knowledge because we're just so into what we're doing.
Mhm.
All right, well, I think that we're supposed to end at 11:45, and I think we did that. I want to thank everyone for participating in the session. Unfortunately, Sola could not join us from Nigeria, but nonetheless, I think I found this really interesting, and maybe you learned a little bit of something if you ever go into teaching, or if you've been teaching 30 years, that you can apply in the future. So from here's lunch. All right. So thanks, everyone. All right. That's a wrap.
So what I'm going to do with this share folder is I'm going to switch permission back to view only for people with the link. But feel free to, I'll leave it here indefinitely. So if you want to take the materials, feel free to make your own copies and do with them as you will.
you've all picked a general topic, and your task is to write